to become a supervisor, shift supervisor, tower supervisor. You know, there are progressions within, and also, if you move to a more complex airspace, you can progress that way too. So there are a lot of opportunities in that career path. But yeah, more to come on that one. Updating the board on LEO reimbursement, we did receive some communication from TSA, was it yesterday? Yeah. And so they would like our officer to essentially stay in the checkpoint. That's where they're kind of drawing the line. Looking across other airports, that's not been the requirement. Having read a number of their agreements, they're typically allowed to go ticketing, baggage claim, everything else. TSA for their part is saying it's inappropriate to discuss other staffing, you know, typical government dodge. You know, the rules don't apply the same to everybody, which, you know, seems odd. So we'll continue to pursue that. To the extent that we have to leave them in the checkpoint, at that point we may consider, you know, not engaging in the LEO reimbursement program. In the past, that's got us about $60,000 a year, I think, or $70,000 a year at most. We think under a new agreement, with slightly longer hours in the checkpoint, maybe we could stretch that up to $150,000 or more. Yeah, but at some point, it's better to have the body than it is to have the reimbursement, and so we've got to kind of make that determination, I think, operationally, and we haven't yet. Now that we know what they're asking for, I think we'll have another conversation on that. We'll also go one more time around the tree of discussing, and, you know, we being treated fairly, or, you know, why are we being, you know, treated differently than other airport agreements we can see. You know, that's an interesting thing, I'll say that.
Is that anything to do with the privatization?
I think it has a lot to do with the privatization. I think it has a lot to do with the privatization and just, you know, an organization that doesn't want a lot of feedback. You know, we've had some difficulties with TSA over the last couple of years from the OSHA audit on the bag claim thing, and, you know, I mean, some behavior that was just frankly a little out of line. You know, with, you know, you have to get this done by October or the world's going to come to an end. Meanwhile, we had a historical review underway on the building that we have to do it. It's another federal requirement. It's a 50-year-old building, and so you know, the incessant drive to get their way, I think, at times, and the fact that we couldn't bend to their will, I think, has caused some difficulty with that organization. So we'll continue to review that. I don't have resolution yet as to what we're going to do. We'll, like I said, probably ask a few more questions, decide how we want to pursue it from there on. We are talking to the delegation. I think we'll continue to talk to the delegation about this. You know, as we all know, the employee screening requirements have been, I think the FAA is now in litigation with about a half dozen airports, maybe more over that. You know, the cyber requirements have kind of faltered because there's no way to transfer information on the secure channel between us and TSA. So they came out with a giant, you know, plan, and you got to do this, and you got to send us that within 60 days, and there's no way to send it. Sort of, you know, undercover agents that go back and forth on the sneaker net. I don't know what they were thinking, but it's something. I'll say that. More to come on that one.
Question on the LEO reimbursement.
Yeah.
The last meeting you said that they were about 35 to 40K in arrears if the airport elects not to move forward.
We'll still get paid for that. They've
Okay,
told,
so
at least
eventually
they've told us we'll get
Yeah.
paid.
So eventually that would shake loose. It
Yeah.
would just be.
Right. Yeah, at one point they were 18 months in arrears. I think it was almost $80,000 or maybe more. We've gotten most of that taken care of, and now we're down, you know, just about 3 months. So, but yeah, hopefully we'll get that any time now. Then the last issue, the customs overnight closures, we're still working on that. I sent an email out to some partner airports that are in the same situation just yesterday. A couple of FBO managers, including Mr. Holman, and also, who else do we have on that one? Seems like there's another party or two. We're pushing back on that a little bit. We're asking for some reasonable restraint in terms of putting that in place. Rather than just kind of willy-nilly shoving it out there, you know, one region only. Basically, the talking points I'm proposing are, if we need it, because for budgetary reasons it should be across the board, I've never heard of a federal agency that decides they're gonna change the way they process anything on a regional basis. That's not typically how things are done, so we'd like to see that implemented across the Chicago and Detroit regions also. So there's unilateral charges being charged to everybody. Number two, we'd like to see it rolled out at the same time across our region, rather than picking and choosing, we're gonna light this market up today, that one tomorrow, which really gives flight managers the opportunity to miss a charge of $500 or $600 in the airport, which is enough to shift business. And then once you lose a flight, a relationship with one of those flight planners, chances are, the other guy gets a real opportunity to win that business long term. And so, that seems unfair to a lot of small communities that are struggling to keep this service. We'd like to see it rolled out across the entire region all at once. The other point we've made too is the large airports, and some of this traffic will shift to large airports. There's just no doubt about it, because they've got free customs clearance. Many of these places are open late, even all night. For instance, there's an airport, I won't name namely, that's on a water port. So they're able to draw from that water port, which is open all night to receive traffic. It's a small airport, not much bigger than we are, but they're able to draw staffing off of that water port staffing and provide this free service. And so now you're taking an airport that has a similar level of service. They can get you cleared quickly because you're going to be the only plane in line at 2 in the morning. But they have an advantage because they won't have to charge, since they can call someone over from the port to come down and clear that plane. And so there's going to be winners and losers there, and so we would propose that the charge be levied across everybody. If you're going to do this for smaller airplanes at smaller cities, you should do it at larger cities. And the rationale is because the cost, these planes are literally like flies to these large airports. Having been on the front line at SeaTac of customs clearance, because I ran the cargo business there, I can tell you those cargo carriers do not want a bunch of small planes in there clogging up the works. And probably those customs agents don't want a bunch of small planes in there clogging up the works, because they're trying to clear a 747 freighter load of traffic. And so there's these bigger, more important things. In addition, those facilities are very expensive. None of these airports have any extra parking. None of them have any extra facilities for the customs folks. So we're going to lump more traffic on top of this kind of festering problem where they don't have the resources to solve it, instead of trying to do the responsible thing and shove these flights out to the smaller communities where they can be processed by a less expensive agent, because they don't get cost of living adjustments here compared to Seattle, and less expensive facilities and in a shorter time frame. And so, I think there's an argument for, if we need this, let's charge it across the board. And the last thing is too, the proposal from CBP is to charge based on the actual salary of the individual times their double time rate. CBP estimated for us would be $500 or $600 per flight, which, as I've said before, is about anywhere from 10 to 3 times what they pay us today to land at our entire airport just for that customs clearance. And so what we've said is, well, it's unfair that you're going to have different rates between airports. So now you're going to have people shopping between airports based on the compensation of a CBP agent that the authority has no responsibility for, or the FBO. So the FBO can't even compete. They might cut their gas price a little bit or something, but they can't affect that CBP rate. So we would like to see a unilateral charge, so it would be the same across all airports. And so I think those are some basic tenements that we could propose to CBP, that seem fair and reasonable and could be supported by the delegations. Right now, we have an alliance of enough airports to involve at least 3 states to try and see if we can move this ball any, and we'll continue to advance that. I proposed a draft letter yesterday, and hopefully we'll get some feedback from the other airports and then get that gemmed up and get out to CBP and our delegations here maybe even this week. So continue to work on that. And then lastly, we've got, I think, hey Rob, will you jiggle that? Oh, you may have to log in.
It's going to take more than that.
You may recall we had planned on a round fireplace a few months ago in the second floor up here, having the engineers involved. Now they've looked at the ceiling loading, and the ceiling is too light to support the hood and the chimney. So we're going to have to connect the hood to the floor,
Was it?
to the superstructure. What'd you say,
Shut
Laura?
off.
You telling me to do something? Okay, there we go. So we've got a couple of options. As I said, it's gonna have to be on the squarish side. You can see there's some bracing there, coming down from that hood to the superstructure. So we've got this option, which is kind of tapered square. I think that's probably my favorite. I think that looks really nice, fits with the space well, kind of draws back to a period of the architecture that's relevant, a little bit more 70-ish in its presentation. There's also just a straight up square. I think this one, whereas this, the taper almost matches the hood taper, and I think we could even ask that those angles be the same to kind of give you a logical point of reference. Then this one kind of matches the chimney in the sense that you've got that same square pattern extending up. I think it's also a nice option, looks good. We could also go to a little bit more of a rectangle presentation. We kind of like this because that space is kind of squarish and it allows you sight lines. And some people want to sit there and watch the exit lane. If we put a big long rectangle there, it might make that a little harder. We've tried to raise the hood substantially so that a standing person can see through the fireplace, because many people there are waiting, and a seated person can also see through that fireplace. I think that's a design element we want to continue, is that height between hood and floor. We've also tried to make the landing around the fireplace large enough that you can sit on it, because we think we'll probably have a lot of people that come in and sit there and warm their back against that fireplace. That fireplace is going to put out some significant BTUs. So one of the elements you see in each one of these, the reason it kind of looks cloudy when you look through the fireplace is we're going to have to grid the glass to dissipate some of that heat on the surface area of the glass. That's a common element you find on many fireplaces. But it is going to put out a significant number of BTUs, so it will be an actual heating element. When you sit there, you'll feel the warmth of it. So I'd invite any feedback. I mean, we don't have to take any official action, but we do need to get something back to the architect post-haste. She'd like to have this week so they can get the company designing on the actual fireplace.
We did already vote on this, didn't
We were gonna go with the round one. Yeah, but the round one we can't do because it's gonna have, those black angle irons are going to have to support some weight.
Is there a significant cost increase with this?
Oh, I don't think it affects cost, no. Just a design element because, as I said, it's gonna have to give some of that support to the stack.
Any cost difference between the two options shown here?
I don't think anything, major. But
Personally, I like the tapered, provided that the angles matched. Otherwise, I think it would look a little, unfortunately, jagged. I think if the tapered is nice, provided that the angles match, and like you said, a standing person isn't staring at
right
the
the
hood.
Yeah.
But it's like, provided those two conditions are met, I think the tapered is very nice.
Yes, I like the taper.
Yeah, the intent was to put that hood high enough so you didn't have obstructed view. When you came up to the top of the escalator, you could still see around.
Because there's just such a great space out there, so.
From a safety standpoint, experience, grandson walked up to a fireplace and put his hand on it because he was intrigued by the fire and just severely burned his hands. And so just, as long as that's taken into consideration with the general public.
Yeah, I think we've got, as I say, there are two elements there. That's one of the reasons we need the wire mesh in the glass, because that dissipates the surface heat, so that the glass itself doesn't retain all that heat. And then secondly, that shelf, as Commissioner Lamont was referring to, that shelf there from the stack stone up is wide enough that, if you toddle over there, you shouldn't be able to touch the glass. Obviously an older child will still be able to do that, and it is a risk. I mean, we've had that fireplace in the back since 2013, probably 14, closer to 14, and I don't know of any accidents we've ever had.
We haven't had any accidents there.
And also, there seems to be a little bit of a lip on there, so even if a smaller kid is trying to climb it, and they're the gray part there, they're not gonna be able to plant their foot.
Because isn't this
There'll be
double
a
glass
capstone on
too?
it, yeah.
So yeah, no, so it's a single pane of glass. In order to get the heat and justify it per the FAA, we've gotta have the heat output, so that's why we had to go to a single pane of glass. And then the framing, the screen will be separated from the glass, so it's not directly up against it. So there will be some heat dissipation by the time it gets from the glass to the screen to, the hottest pieces will probably be the structure that hold up the screen, so. Again, and that would be the farthest from any little kid being able to reach from the seated part to the framing itself, so.
Also, there's just a certain level of don't touch hot things and don't let your children touch hot things if at all possible. So.
Yeah, I've seen the public around.
And that's the reason.
It has something to do with a fountain.
Yeah,
Fair.
and the old cougar.
Escalators.
Escalators, yeah.
Yeah, the poor old cougar is a great example of that. So it sounds like there's a consensus for the taper. Yeah.
I like it, but my opinion's always wrong, so. This is my wife tells me.
Yeah. Can I call my wife real quick? No, I think it was great.
All right, well, we'll proceed on that with the taper. And that is all I have on the director's report.
And just so you know, I will be in Butte all weekend, so if there's anything I can do on that.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I'll be down at the conference, so.
That's this week.
It starts Thursday. All right, moving on, item number 1, capital project, Gate 2 Jet Bridge refurbishment.
Yeah, I would propose that we pull this from the agenda until next month. We've gotten 2 bids, and both bids were over $400,000, so it's substantially more than we had expected. And so we are going to take another look at buying a refurbished bridge. There are some items on that bridge that I think need more immediate service than I would like. The canopy, for example, that design of canopy needs some additional bracing. There's been some separation events where the canopy can actually crack off, it sounds like. And so we need to do something with that bridge, whether it's engage in a $400,000 scope of work to renovate it, or whether it's acquire a new bridge. We definitely need to move forward with something, but at this point, I don't think it's worth debating this particular item, bring it back next month with a different course of action and a different budget.
Is this usable at all at the moment?
Yeah, oh, it is. It's usable. I mean, it is functioning, but it's got a bearing in there that's near its endpoint, and at some point it will just seize. In addition, like I said, we've got the canopy really does need to be reinforced if we're going to use it long term. And so, but at the same time, this bridge is 1980s vintage. So considering replacing it is also not a terrible idea. So to give you an idea of scope, we got a really good deal on Jet Bridge 1. It was bought new. I forget which airport, but an airport had ordered a dozen or more bridges at once, and they had this one, ended up they couldn't use it. And so we were able to buy that for $390,000, I think, approximately.
Yeah, it was 3 something.
Yeah, and so we got that one brand new from the factory for $390,000. And then in 14, we bought a bridge for the new gate, which was Gate 3, and I believe that bridge, I'm sorry, it wasn't new, it was refurbished. So it was a bridge they'd taken and put everything new in it. And so I think that one was in the 327 range, somewhere in there.
Yeah, maybe not quite that high.
Wasn't quite 280, maybe. And then we bought Bridge 4. Alaska came to us a couple years ago, I think in 19, and said, hey, we're gonna get rid of the Q400s tomorrow, and we need a bridge like in 6 weeks. And so we hustled up and found a refurbished one. We paid up a little bit for that because the timeline wasn't great, but it still wasn't more than 430. I think that was the 389 bridge, actually. And so that was another refurbished bridge, brand new motors and everything, so they're good as new. Just the tunnels themselves are not original. And so this was kind of a surprise. It's well over anything we've ever paid before to acquire a bridge, and it's just a renovate in place. And so with that renovate in place, I mean, there's a lot that goes into that. We would have gotten a new control system that matches the drive system on the other bridges that we already have. They'll pull it up and service the jack screw to make sure that it's sound long term. We've got to tear those bearings out, and replace those, all new motors. As you can imagine, there's 101 motors on these things that make it do everything it does. It's kind of like a transformer, you know, doing all kinds of things. And so there's a lot that goes into that. It is extensive. But at this point, I think we need to look at other options to, rather than just renovating.
Makes sense. So you're gonna vote to table it then, is that the best way to do that, Melanie?
Not necessarily. I guess we could table the refurbishment, but I think it's gonna be a new item probably coming back.
Well, I think we just table it and we'll bring it back with proposed course of action. Yeah, I think tabling is probably the right thing to do.
Okay. So can I have a motion to table this, the Jet Bridge to refurbishment, pending a further course of action?
I move.
Got a motion to table, any additional comments? Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. All right. Item number 2, capital project phase 2 access control.
Yes, phase 1 of the access control gave us our first access control system we've ever had. We actually have badges now that do stuff, which is really cool. It's actually functioned, I have to admit, better than I expected. In my past experience, the door locks are not that reliable. And you know, a lot of doors that people think are closed, but they're not locked. We haven't really experienced a lot of that. We've had people blatantly leave doors open, and now that we have video, we can see that. But we haven't had doors really malfunctioning, and so I'm excited to say I think so far, at least the first phase of it's a pretty good success. Most of our sided doors, the doors that go between public areas and AOA areas, are now access controlled with a camera and a door alarm and a door sensor, obviously, with that door alarm that tells the door whether or not it's shut. And so we want to extend that to some other doors that we have. We have several doors on, I think 4 of them, on stairwells along the back of the building from the days when airplanes were primarily ground loaded. And so for the last couple of years, the airlines have been locked out of those doors because we rarely use them. And so we've just locked them and we have the only key. We'd like to get access control on those doors. We had Bridge 1 go down for several weeks in the last month, and we had to check a key out to United so they could open that door. It'd be good to have access control on that so our guys can come readily in and out. And when we want to give access to one of the airlines, we can pretty quickly on the computer. And so we'd like to get those doors put in. There's a door between the kitchen and the sterile area in Oakwells that is occasionally used for food deliveries. Today, one of our officers goes over there and monitors the food delivery in the mornings when they're bringing prepared sandwiches, that kind of thing, because the big commercial kitchen is on pre-security and a lot of the sales are post-security. So we want to get that door wired up. In addition, we had a fairly in-depth conversation with TSA about the need to lock the jet bridge doors at the far end of the jet bridge. In the past, we didn't really have a lock at the top of the jet bridge door that would prevent somebody that got into the jet bridge from coming into the terminal, what we call the sterile area. We now have, with the access control system, there is a badge reader, so that door is locked, but TSA is so concerned about someone that might somehow end up out on the ramp, well, so they didn't climb the fence.
Public?
I guess I gotta change my tune on this one. Somebody that climbs a fence or something like that, getting access to an airplane, and so they want the jet bridge door locked at the end of the jet bridge where the stairs are where they hand your bag off. They want us to have an access control on that, and so we currently have cipher locks, which would be acceptable. The problem with the cipher lock is when it's really cold, the grease that makes that lock work sets up, and the lock doesn't always work. It'll either not work very well, or occasionally it'll hang up and not clear the code. So the last button will just kind of keep the code there, and the next person up can just open the door. So we want to replace that with something that's a little more weather hardy. So we're planning to replace it with just a badge reader, so you can just come up and badge to open that door. And then obviously a magnetic lock and some mechanical locks, which should resolve some of the weather proofness of the locking mechanism. Because like any door that's exposed outside, there's mechanical parts that become harder to operate when it's cold. So occasionally the latch itself won't latch unless you pull it. With a magnetic lock, the magnet will receive some heat from the electricity in the magnet, which is probably enough, we're told by the FICO, to lock that door. So, yeah, we're proposing loading bridge doors, stair doors, kitchen, and then the biggest item on the second phase is the gate out here on the east side of the terminal. We want to add the remote capability to inspect vehicles. It's the only gate we have that leads into the sterile area. And so it's primarily used by deliveries. The beer guy, the Coke guy, they go in there and deliver to the back of the building where the storage room and the freezer is for the concessionaire. And so we want to be able to, not always, but on a random basis, have them throw up the panels, inspect everything, have cameras in place, have a badge reader there so we can go in and out, and then we'll move the gate inland towards the airfield about 30 feet to allow a panel truck to pull up and sit there and be out of the way of the loading dock while we're waiting to inspect it. On other occasions, we'll go out and do a physical inspection as we're doing today. Today it's all physical inspection. We'd like the capability to do remote inspections some of the time. And so that's the major ticket item. That's why we have a second phase that's pretty substantial at $250,000. Going forward, we'll have additional phases. I think probably in the 30 to 40 range, every year is our plan, kind of to add some doors. Kind of what I've told operations is look, as we break the old cipher locks in like janitor closets and places like that, let's just add those into this system and replace them with these, because the cipher locks are about as much money as wiring a door. And so we're just kind of onesie, twosie over time. Janitor closets aren't really critical because everything had to be inspected to go into the janitor closet. There shouldn't be any sharps in there or anything we don't want showing up on an airplane. But at the same time, we have to lock it with something. We might as well move these onto our system where we can control access remotely from the computer and see who went in what. That way, if we ever looking for someone or have someone back that we don't want back there, we can identify some of those locations that they've been using the cameras, the access control records from that's generated every time you buzz in. So, yeah, we're asking for $250,000 total. Most of that will come from our infrastructure bill money, and then the remainder of it will be local match.
So future phases will probably be primarily just authority funds?
I would imagine, yeah, because here next, not 25 but 26, we run out of bill money. So we've been funding this program with bill and AIP, and so as that money dries up, we'll probably just be using authority funds every year and get reimbursed from the airlines through the rate base.
Any additional comments, questions, concerns on the access control? All right, can I have a motion for authorization to proceed with the design and construction of phase 2 access control system in an amount not to exceed $250,000? Got a motion, any additional comments? Can I get a second?
I'll second.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. And nay. The ayes have it. All right, item number 3, warehouse condominiums, unit sale or lease prices.
Yeah, as we're nearing the completion of the warehouses, we have not spent our contingency dollars, which is good. We have substantial contingency in there as a greenfield site, not knowing what we might run into, but we've been able to retain the majority of that. And so we're proposing slightly lower rates. We had some rates out there in advance of contracting all the elements to, in case someone was interested and wanted to move on a unit early, we were conservative with those. Looking at the market as we sit in 2024, we've tried to reconcile what we've got with the market. And warehouses right now are generating a capitalization rate of just under 5%. So essentially that's your value times 5% is typically the annual rent. That's what the forecast is for 2024. That's down a little bit from where they were a few years ago, probably because costs have gone up on construction. aggressively, as we all know. And so using that cap rate, we end up with a unit price that's closer to about $17 per square foot for a lease.